Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Chris Hill, COO and co-founder of Massdriver. Massdriver lets teams quickly build engineering platforms, enable developer self-service, whether you run workloads in containers, VMs, or serverless. Chris, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm excited to chat with you, learn more about your background, your experience, what you're doing at Massdriver. But before we get into all that good stuff, what were you doing before you started the company?
Well, first of all, thanks. It's good to be here. I'm excited to do this. So my background originally goes back to, I started off as a software developer, and it was actually in defense. So I live here in Colorado. There's a lot of defense contractors that recruit out of Colorado here. So I was at Lockheed Martin for about 7 years and mostly doing software development, but I got into some networking and security stuff while I was there as well, and I knew I wanted to get out. And so I found an escape hatch, and I moved out to some ad tech. I originally went to do development there as well, but that's where I moved into cloud operations, infrastructure and operations. The company had grown big enough that they were looking to build out an actual team to handle that. And so I led that team, and then I've kind of been doing that ever since. I did it there, and I've done it at some other companies. And most recently, I was at a company called The Real Real, and I was helping them get off of Heroku and into the cloud, as many companies have to do.
Yeah, I've used the real, definitely to purchase some products. But how is the engineering process different based on the products? Is it based on technology? You know, you've done kind of defense engineering, you've done ad tech and marketing tech, and I'm always curious on how engineering teams are structured. And coming from the insight that you have, what makes it different from company to company, or is it the tools they use, or is it the product, is it the environment? What makes that process different when you're building your product and technology?
Sure. I think you have to kind of set Lockheed Martin aside. They're a beast
Yeah.
of their own because they are so different. And a big part of that is because if you're going to work on classified programs, they have a very difficult time working with open source products. And so unfortunately that believes that so much of modern technology is moving forward through open source that they're, like a decade behind. At least they were when I was there. I don't know if it's much better. But once you get out, the industry it's going to shift what the priority is for the business. For the ad tech company, it's, the ability to scale and handle a lot of data and handle it as fast as you can, because nobody's going to wait for, the ads to show up, and you don't want the publishers hosting your ad to be like, you've made our page load time really slow. When you get to something like e-commerce, it's all about uptime. Because if the website's down, they aren't making money. And so, I think it it shifts, kind of what the priorities are and where the money's going to get spent in terms of what's important.
Yeah.
And the teams just have to, adjust around that.
Yeah. When you kind of transitioned out of, being in an engineering kind of team management mindset as well into the founding kind of capacity where you're kind of iterating and creating product vision, and it's obviously, different environment, but how was that transition like? If I was a developer today, but I had an idea, and I had this inclination to follow that passion or idea or what have you. How is that transition like? And is there anything that in retrospect, you would give advice on that transition?
It's very much it's a shift in mindset you have to have in terms of what's when you're working on a task, what's finished looks like. It's very easy at these. If you're at a more mature company, the there's a lot more that goes into bringing a feature to market. And I
Yeah.
think when you're in a startup world, particularly a very early stage startup, you oftentimes are still searching, and
Yeah.
you can't spend 3 months working on a feature because you don't even know if this feature is going to be used or if it's going to move the needle on adoption of your product. And so
Yeah.
having to shift that down, um, there's a great book. It's called Lean Startup, which talks about this
Yeah.
very short-term iterative method of getting MVPs out very quickly and then try and get as much feedback on it as you can. And it's very difficult. We engineers, we love big ideas, a lot of
Yeah.
pieces, putting it all together and getting something that works. And it's kind of, you have to shrink that down to something that you
Yeah.
can execute on and get feedback on very quickly.
Yeah. How do you go about trimming the process of making the perfect product versus making something that's, has minimum viability?
Yeah, step one is, if you're far enough along to have customers and people using your platform or your product, that's talking with them and figuring out like what they're saying. And it doesn't necessarily mean exactly what they're saying you'll build, but figure out what the pain point is, and then figure out the smallest thing that you can possibly build that would start to address that problem. And go out, try building it. We try to keep it to, a week to a couple of weeks and get that thing out there. And if it goes out and they like it, now you have feedback that you can go one way or another. Did they like it? Did it solve their problem? And in a small way, can you make it better in certain ways? And now you can iterate on it as opposed to trying to build this huge thing that nobody's going to use, right?
Yeah. Has anything changed in your mind about building engineering teams now that you've done so at a company that wasn't yours, and now that it's a product that you're focused on growing and building and iterating on? Has anything changed in how you think about building engineering teams in particular?
Yeah, for one thing, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to complain about how everything's being run when
Yeah.
when you're one of the engineers and you're
Yeah.
looking up and you see all the ways that things could be done better. And then once you're in the position of leadership, making those decisions, you understand sometimes how those decisions how you can end up in them. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, I think one thing is we have a very good interview process.
Yeah.
And a lot of this actually came from one of our co-founders, Dave, who's doing, he's our CTO. And so he's doing a lot of the tech hiring. And um, for one thing, instead of coming up with these coding assignments that we do, or that you hand off to people and say, go see if you can do what we think you need to do to be able to do this job and do it on your own time, no matter how long it's going to take, and then come back, we're going to grade you on whether you could do it well. What we do is we reach out to the people and we tell them, you go find something you're knowledgeable about, that you're passionate about, and like an open source issue. And
Yeah.
we're going to come in and we're the ones who don't know anything about it. And you're the expert. And now we get to see, one, what you're interested in. We get to see how you work in terms of communication, of somebody who knows less than you about this. Can you communicate it well? And then we get to see how you work through and solve this problem. And it's worked very well for us. And I
Yeah.
think it also makes it a lower pressure environment for these people to come in and interview, because
Yeah.
nobody really likes these coding assignments.
No, yeah. We run a company where we connect developers with startups, me and my co-founder. And yeah, the biggest plight is the coding assignments. Some companies it's like, very necessary. There's maybe some component or it's a specialized technology, but for the most part, that's not the point of what they're trying to get at. And
Mhm.
companies are having a hard time to understand how to address, some of those knowledge and skill set in a way that is, inspiring and actually accurate to what their abilities are. So I love that method. I haven't heard that one, and I'll definitely share that one with the clients there. Yeah, good.
The other benefit that you get from that is that when you're bringing people in, you know, oftentimes you run into the situation where you're trying to shoehorn somebody into a position, and you look at their resume and you're just like, they hit about 50,
Yeah,
75% of what we're looking for. I think they can do it. Whereas if you bring somebody in, you say, what are you good at? What are you passionate about? And
yeah,
and now I have to find out, where can I find a place to fit you in this organization where you want to provide a lot of value, and they're happier and we're happier because, we had the right expectations going in, and they are able to now do things that they're good at, that they care about. And it seems to, we've kind of done different and interview processes with some of our candidates, and though
mhm,
that process seems to go very well.
yeah. No, that's incredible. I love that. I love that the creative thinking around that as well. What was back to Massdriver? What was the inspiration from? You were building product, you were building engineering teams, and then you decided to go full in on this idea and this product. What was the inspiration behind Massdriver and addressing the problem that you saw in the market?
Yeah, so it actually stemmed out of a conversation that was between, so there's two other co-founders here. Corey O'Daniel is our CEO and Dave Williams is our CTO. And they were discussing some ideas and everything that they had. And they kept coming back to this issue of who is going to do the ops work, who's going to do the cloud work, who's going to, spend all day just messing with Terraform. And they were fighting over it. And uh, here's like seasoned professionals who,
Yeah.
they're in a similar boat to me where they've done both ops and development for, a decade and a half, and they're fighting over doing this work. And it almost kind of pushed all of these other ideas aside and said, wait a second, like this is very clearly an issue.
Yeah.
And maybe this is the issue to solve. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where the original, I think, inspiration for Massdriver was born, of recognizing that this world of DevOps that we're in right now is just it's very much a struggle, and not just for us, and not just for engineers, for organizations.
Yeah.
And there's got to be a better way to do it, and we decided to try to build something
Yeah.
that would be a better way to solve all these problems.
Yeah. How is it changing the way products are being built now?
Sure. So, for one, if you go and you look at the DevOps where it's currently at, I mean, just go pull up the CNCF landscape, and it is just littered with products. And on one hand, that's great because there's innovation going on, and people are doing new things and thinking differently. And that's fantastic. But unfortunately, the bad side of it is there are 70, 80 different monitoring and observability products.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
choose one. There's 50 different under CI/CD.
Yeah.
There's another 50 under, application like packaging and deployment. So it's becoming very, very fragmented. And the original promise of DevOps was that, it was going to tear down these silos. There's going to be harmony between the two teams. Everything was going to go faster. But what's kind of happened for most teams, as they try to do this DevOps thing, is either they go out and they build a DevOps team, which ironically is the antithesis of DevOps, right? It's supposed to be a
Yeah.
methodology, not a team.
Yeah.
But they go and they build this team with very expensive talent. The DevOps roles are very expensive. And now you're stuck in these silos and you're passing work back and forth, and it's not great. That's played out a lot of times. It doesn't work great. The other option is you just go find, one of your probably most experienced software engineers, and you tell them, go learn the cloud and go learn all these tools. And now you've taken one of your best assets in terms of product development, software development, and you've shifted them off to this thing that really isn't increasing the value of your company. You're just preventing outages for the most part. And so the industry, I think, is shifting more towards this idea of platforms, and having a platform where your operations teams can come and encode knowledge, and your developers can come in a sense, consume, self-service, consume that knowledge. Another name for it is internal developer platforms.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're trying to go. We're trying to build a platform that, particularly for early stage teams, you can very quickly get in, provision, get your infrastructure and your applications both up and running. But then it scales with you. It deploys into your environment. So it's not like Heroku. We run in your cloud, and any of the three major clouds, AWS, GCP, Azure. You own it from that point on, and it's extensible. Our spec is all open sourced. And so you can, if you don't like the way that we're provisioning for perhaps like a VPC, you can rewrite it and make your own VPC. And so now your developers can be deploying that instead. And so it's fully customizable for these more advanced teams. And now you have a platform where everybody's speaking the same language. It's visual. You can all see what's going on. We get metrics and alarms and everything in it. And we hope it's a platform now where collaboration can really happen, but not the way it's going right now.
Yeah. What's the challenge? I talked to a lot of, I've talked to some crypto companies, and obviously a lot of that's open source information, and code and things along that nature. What's the challenge of managing that open source information? Because I'm assuming it's not all, it's not all the best solution to implement and recode your platform. But a lot of it is useful in different ways. How do you manage that information? How do you implement that? What are the challenges and what are the benefits of having something that's open source?
So, I mean, for us, one of the things about the benefits of open source is that and to be clear, the pieces that we've open sourced on our platform are going to be what we call the bundles or infrastructure bundles. It's going to be the idea of like an AWS VPC or an AWS RDS database or a GCP memory store Redis cluster. And so the open source part, for one, is that everybody can actually see what it is that we're doing. We're not trying to hide. We do not want to be a black box. So everybody can see exactly what it is that we're doing. We can also accept contributions. But the, one of the things you kind of mentioned, the scoping of it, is that I've been doing this, all of the co-founders here have been doing this long enough. We've seen that it's fairly similar patterns for how most companies are running this infrastructure. And so we're going for the 80% solution on all of these bundles. We try to make sure we get security and compliance in these things, and we try to build it, to be able to scale. But obviously there's going to be customization that has to happen, particularly for, the more mature companies that might have very specific needs. And so even from there, now they have a point that they can fork our bundle, our infrastructure repository bundle, and they can now go, modify it and do it on their own. And so this allows companies to self-serve in building their own things. We also want to, get partnerships with a lot of these other, organizations, like Elastic and Mongo, so that they can now provision their things through our platform. And it allows the platform to be much more extensible and community driven, which is something that we're looking for.
Yeah. How do you go about, obviously you said the traditional sense of building an engineering team and working through the DevOps processes to then go and either grab your most senior engineer, tell them to learn the cloud, or hire an entire DevOps team, but then that kind of silos the information. How do you go about communicating this kind of disruptive product? And I use that word because I think it's true to its nature in terms of disruption. It is creating a new pathway that is different from the incumbent. How do you go about communicating and helping companies transition? Because I'm sure it's not easy to tell them that you can do what you're doing maybe more efficiently, but with less resources with this piece of technology. How do you communicate that value?
Well, one of the things we try to do is, we try to set up a proof of concept. We go in with, one of our prospective clients, we ask for a POC, and we try to take them through that whole process in as short of amount of time as possible. And so just, a couple of weeks ago, we had someone who came online with a fresh, AWS environment, and we were able to get a VPC, a Kubernetes cluster, a database, and one of their own custom applications all up and running it was an hour and 6 minutes. And so, and with that, then there was also the observability part of it. So, in our bundles, we put alarms around failure conditions. So on this database, they'll now be notified when CPU or memory or disk or any of these things reach failure thresholds. And so seeing that of how quickly they were able to build best practice infrastructure in their own cloud, have it all connected. And we also handle like security, so like IAM roles and things like that, and firewall rules. We handle that for them. So it's secure, it's best practice, and it's provision. And they didn't have to do significant research on this thing, and it was up and going in an hour and 6 minutes. And so that it's very easy to see the value proposition there, particularly for these early stage companies. And then as we grow for some of the more mature ones, we'll see, companies that have a massive DevOps team, but they're slowed down to a grind because they're dealing with a whole lot of these just little tasks of creating S3 buckets, modifying some Terraform, doing all this. And when developers can self-serve and they can visualize the environment, understand the dependencies, because it's a visual tool, it frees up your operation engineers to now actually be SREs. And now they're not just SREs in title where they get to get paid more for doing the same work. Now they can actually focus on how do I add value to the business, because making the new S3 bucket doesn't really add value to the business. It's something that this product needs. But now you can focus on how do we actually scale this thing? How can I build things that will help the product? And that's what you can do. So you're maximizing even the value you're getting out of your existing, workforce of operations engineers.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I love products that kind of create this expedited process, and allows the current teams to function at a higher level. And just by enabling them to do processes more quicker, especially, one thing that you said that I think resonates with a lot of, successful products is that, if something is fairly standard across multiple
Mhm.
organizations when they're building product, then there should be something to expedite. I mean, we talk about it from a small scale in my company, where it's like, if you're doing something 5 times similar, then let's create some kind of templatized or automated process, right? To make that process more efficient, because that amount of time you save, it compounds on itself. Um, thinking about, the transition, and I love that your three founders splitting the responsibilities to do three different roles. What's particularly challenging about your role, and I guess splitting it, the responsibilities with your founders?
Yeah. So Corey being the CEO, he's kind of responsible for just the vision, and luckily he has a exponentially larger, social media presence than either Dave or I. We've kind of hidden ourselves for years, and now we're having
Yeah.
to get out and show our faces on all these places. So he's out kind of communicating where we're going and the vision for this platform, and setting that. Dave is working a lot on the technology. So early on, I kind of handled one whole piece of the tech stack. And I'm at a point now, I'm moving a little bit more out of that role, and I'm going much more into kind of sales and analytics to try to understand, because I'm kind of out doing a lot of the interfacing with the customers and getting them on the platform. And
Yeah.
first, there's the challenge of that's just a very new role. And, to all the other founders out there, this is where you're going to be challenged, is that,
Yeah.
engineering is where all of us just want to fall back to, because this is what we're good at,
Yeah.
what we know how to do. And forcing yourself to get out of that and, go out and be talking to customers, understanding what they're doing, communicating that into requirements. And sometimes it's having to let go of a lot of the technology
Yeah.
to focus on things that the business actually needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's been the tough part, is
Yeah.
extracting myself from engineering.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love that you're kind of customer focused, and right now, in terms of the onboarding process. Is there a couple of favorite questions that you like to ask customers that help guide the product vision, or guide your onboarding process with them? I always like to ask that, just to see if there's anything I can take from it.
no, it's not. Honestly, that's, first of all, that is a great question. If you're out and you're talking with customers, the first thing that you should be trying to find out is, what is the pain that they're experiencing, so that
Yeah.
our product can be the pain reliever to that. And so, um, that's something we usually ask, particularly early in the calls, is, how is this DevOps journey going for you guys? And most of the time, it's very, very rare that we get somebody saying it's going well. There's something that the companies are struggling with. Either they don't have the expertise, or they have the expertise, but communication is an issue, or they even have people on the team, but they're trying to use technologies that they aren't familiar with. Because now, if you look at your operations folks, they're having to know, the cloud. So if you're using serverless things, SNS, SQS, S3, you have to learn Aurora and those databases. If you're running in containers, now they have to know EKS and ECR and all of these
Yeah.
pieces. So there's just a massive amount. And so finding the right people that know all of this stuff is very, very hard. And so just asking that question of, what is difficult, and it kind of depends on the stage of the company. The early stage companies, they just don't have the expertise. They're either fumbling through the cloud, or they're on a pass, and they know eventually they're going to have to get off. And that's very intimidating to them. Or it's, these larger companies that just don't have the efficiency or the productivity they would like out of the teams. And ironically, that's what DevOps promised them, is that everybody's going to be more productive. And now that they're introducing DevOps, everything is a lot slower.
Yeah.
They're trying to
Yeah.
figure out what to
Yeah.
do with that.
Yeah. Do you have a percentage in terms of, like, the percentage of productivity you gain as a company if you adopt something like Massdriver?
Yeah, there's going to be upfront. There's there's the migration time, which particularly for some of our, enterprise or larger clients, we white glove, some of that for them to help them get on the platform. And once they're on, particularly the productivity for their operations teams goes up. I would say drastically because now they're able to focus just on, um, the self-service sort of things that their developers need, and especially for their development team, because now they're not sending tickets over. Instead of sitting and waiting for 2 weeks on that S3 bucket that you asked for to get provisioned, you can go drag that onto your canvas and
Yeah.
let the ops guy know and say, hey, does this look good? Or you can even just provision it yourself and then tear it down after you're done if it's just an ephemeral environment. And so for developers, it can drastically lower the amount of time that you spent waiting on your ops teams, like
Yeah. Yeah.
90%,
Wow.
and then, yeah, for ops teams, they're able to just focus on, it could be similar work if they're customizing a lot of their bundles, but otherwise they could focus on now not even any of like the Terraform or cloud stuff. It's now, how do I help our product actually get better? And so
Yeah.
it's almost a complete shift in what they're working on. It's not even an increase in productivity.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's incredible. I think, one thing that's not spoken a lot, but I've learned through experience is once you're able to, understand where your company's at and readjust or redistribute responsibilities to make it either more efficient or have people focus on, things that they specialize on, it
Mhm.
really does affect the productivity in an exponential way. Which, good.
Yeah, yeah, well, you mentioned a specialization there, and that's what's interesting is that so many companies are focused on tearing down silos, and oftentimes the way the companies go about tearing down silos is trying to create an army of generalists of like everybody's going to share all of this knowledge. And look, I understand there is a benefit of having knowledge spread out across some of your team members, but specialization, I like, and this is kind of one of the things we've started saying. This is a feature. If you're building a team and you can only have 5 engineers, you don't want 5 generalists. What you want
Yeah.
is, 2 or 3 just dope developers who
Yeah.
understand your domain and the language that you're in. You want an awesome, if you're an ad tech, you want an awesome big data guy, and
Yeah.
maybe you want another guy who's in, working with databases, or
Yeah.
you want specialization across those. You just need a something that allows them to communicate and collaborate together effectively. And that's where we think this movement towards, platforms is going to come in, is it's that
Yeah.
ground now where collaboration happens and you can have specialization and actually
Yeah.
benefit from it. Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's so funny the timing of this. I just chatted with with another founder, and they were focusing on the QA process and creating a platform that enables companies to utilize and this QA automation system, but at a different level where they don't have to have a whole built out QA team. And it sounds like it is moving towards those platforms because developers need to focus on what they're really good at versus things that are a necessity but can be replaced by something that you see is similar across the board. What are some of the biggest risks that Massdriver faces today?
Well, I'll tell you what, when very early on, when we were just talking about, like this whole product and what we were doing,
Yeah,
I think it actually is that lean startup book, or with
yeah,
another one I read, they talk about what are the miracles that you need for your product to be successful.
yeah,
And if you haven't found any, then you need to think harder, because there are,
yeah,
right? There's a certain number of miracles or big things. And what we identified was that, this is a shift in mindset, that we are hoping and kind of trying to encourage these companies to make in terms of how they go about managing, embracing the idea of platform engineering more so than what DevOps was, because DevOps kind of taken over the industry. And
yeah,
is the industry going to shift to this? And I absolutely think the value proposition is there. And I can tell you from talking with a lot of the customers, they're very, very excited about what we're doing.
yeah,
One of my big concerns when I was getting out there talking to people is that we were going to face a lot of resistance of people who are going to say, what is this thing you're building?
yeah,
This isn't useful. And it's exactly the opposite. There's a lot of excitement and people are like, yes, this is what the industry needs. And so
yeah,
that has been probably, as we were just kind of building the first POC of this was always in the back of our minds, like, is this going to even work, or are people going to
yeah,
do it? And
yeah,
the good news is it appears it's the perfect time that the industry is starting to recognize that we need to move beyond DevOps into something else that's better.
yeah,
And if this adoption of platform engineering continues, and I think it should, I think it's better for the industry. I think that's going to be huge.
Yeah. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Massdriver?
That's a great question. We would love to be a our CTO Dave talks about the platform in terms of we want this to be your like headquarters that you leave up all day long to understand your system and what's going on. And this was something early on, or investors would kind of talk to us and ask us, why wouldn't somebody just come and provision their stuff and then leave your product? And it's like, well, if we want to add so much value in terms of understanding what you're running, being able to visualize it, being able to, because we also handle parity. So you can design out what you want, and then you can clone that to another environment, whether that's, staging to production. And
Yeah.
so then this can turn into ephemeral environments. This can also turn into deploying the enterprise SaaS model. And so we want this to be a place where it is so easy for engineering teams to work well together, to understand the health of their system, what they are running, how it's connected, that it would be very, very painful for them to do business without it. And not
Yeah.
because it's hard to get off, but because there's so much value added by what our platform does for you. The tedious stuff.
Badass. Yeah. Badass, man. It's awesome to see products like yours that are enabling these teams to build quicker, design and build products, communicate more easily because, if we're in this mindset where we're enabling people to build cooler things faster and it opens up the opportunity to just even lower level consumers on a day-to-day basis because companies are able to, connect with them and build the things that they care about in a timely manner, which is awesome to see. And I know we're coming close to time and I could continue talking to you about, developer and development environment. But before we get up, I do want to know what books or people have influenced you the most, one for selfish research, but two for my audience to gather some cool new research or gems from information out there. But yeah, what books or people have influenced you the most?
For particularly for the startup life that I'm going through right now, I've really liked the Lean Startup has been fantastic. That's kind of about these short development cycles and developing these POCs. And the hard thing about hard things, and I'm probably giving you the same ones that everybody gives you. Those were both really, really good books that I recommend. If you're starting off on this journey of creating a company, both of them were very useful in giving some perspective and also giving some kind of tips for how to manage the chaos
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
this world.
Yeah. Any people that you particularly find inspiring or kind of shared knowledge with you that you were like, oh man, whatever they say are extremely actionable. Yeah, I don't know if anybody comes to mind, but I like debate the question.
That I'm, I don't tell him this, but I would actually say Corey or Daniel, our CEO, he's been
Yeah.
very, very influential, even for me in my career. And so I've been working with him now for like 8 years,
Wow.
I think. And so I really enjoy working with him. Obviously, I follow Kelsey Hightower and a lot of the stuff that he's doing. I think he has a very good pulse on the industry and where it's going. And I'm a Kubernetes guy, man.
Yeah.
So I love it. And so I'm a big fan of his as well.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, I love where the company's going, the product that you're building, how you think about, enabling your customers and the process in which that, you've done so. I think, a lot of people can learn from your experience. And, last little bit, I always like to give my founders an opportunity to give me their plugs. What's your Twitters? What's your LinkedIn's? Where can we find and support Massdriver and the mission and the product that you're building?
Absolutely. So website is www.massdriver.cloud. Please go check us out. We also have, you can find us on LinkedIn. There's Corey O'Daniel, there's me, Christopher Hill, and there's Dave Williams. We also have Massdriver on there. I forget on LinkedIn if it's massdriver.cloud or just Massdriver, but those are probably the big ones. You can also check us out on GitHub. Please go take a look at some of our open source repos for infrastructure. Even if you're not looking into the platform itself, you can see how our Terraform works, and
Yeah.
maybe that'll help you as well. So
I love that. We have a huge community of developers that listen to the podcast along with founders as well. So I'm excited to share that with them and get them involved. But Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed yourself. I love learning about your background and experience, and I'm really excited about where the platform's going to go. So thank you again for being on the show.
thanks. It was great talking to you.
Yeah.